You're listening to KZUM News on 89.3 KZUM Lincoln and KZUM HD. Good afternoon and welcome to today's edition of KZUM News, an hour dedicated to learning more about what is going on in Lincoln and the surrounding areas. I am the news director and your host, Amantha Dickman.
My name is Rebecca Ford, KZUM's newsroom intern, and I will be your host for today. Last weekend, we looked at political protests, specifically those here in Lincoln, to learn how policy and administrative changes impact our community and to gauge whether the current political tension, unrest, and instability we're experiencing is unusual or simply part of the status quo. We spoke with two social work students from Nebraska Wesleyan University to get their takes on the protests that they attended and to receive some insight on the protest experience. We also spoke with Dr. Alexandria Putman, assistant professor of political science at Nebraska Wesleyan University, to assess the nature of a local protest. Here's a clip from that interview.
So in terms of local political protests, usually they're fairly small and in some ways much more organized events. Typically when we see protests, especially around organizational changes or administration changes, rather, they tend to be very locally centered. So, for example, when President Obama took office, the Tea Party organized several small town hall type protests to protest his administration. Typically, when we see regular protest behavior in areas like this, more localized protest behavior, we're looking at things like town halls, or occasionally you'll see like a march, or even I've seen recently where people are boycotting different industries or restaurants that support views that they're not as fond of. So generally, when we see protests on this scale, we're looking at something that's typically a little bit smaller, but maybe more frequent and functional in that way.
That was Dr. Alexandria Putman, assistant professor of political science at Nebraska Wesleyan University, discussing what political protests look like on a local level here in Lincoln. With the administration changes, we can always expect some sort of response from folks on either side of party lines. Recently, Lincoln has experienced a surge of those responses through protest. Today, we want to continue digging deeper into the political instability we've experienced. We'll continue to tune into the testimonies of some protest attendees to learn their firsthand experiences and to get their perspectives. First with us is Brooke Burchett, who attended the march at Trago Park on Wednesday, January 29th. The march was a general protest pushing back against policy regarding deportation and immigration, bodily autonomy, climate change, and a number of other issues. We had two students with us last week discussing their experiences at the same protest. Brooke introduces a new, non-student perspective and shares how the current political climate has impacted her family.
Jumping into it, you went to, it was just the Wednesday protest you went to, is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Gotcha. How did you hear about that?
I saw it through Reddit. I joined the Reddit page once I saw on TikTok that people were doing protests and organizing protests. So saw it on Reddit and joined that way. And then my friend and I showed up, and it was actually a really big turnout. So
yeah, could you give me an estimate on how many people you think went?
At least a couple hundred. It was a pretty big chunk of people. Yeah, once we started marching, the line was so long. I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, it was crazy. It was a lot of people.
Yeah, what were the issues that were being protested?
Trump being in office, the deportations mainly, the fascist government that we are definitely in, a broad general protest, just in wanting to impeach Trump, I think, is the general thing, because he is definitely just a terrible leader and is showing that he does not care about people in general. So that was why I went, at least. But yeah, so I don't know.
Well, I want to ask, I know that a lot of these protests are pretty general. How do these issues or the administration or any of these things, can you sort of describe how that's impacting you?
Yeah, so I come from a Republican family, and I grew up religious, and I still am religious. And I think the main thing with that, with my personal, like really, it's not affecting me personally.
Mhm.
It is just affecting what I believe in, and this is just not a way that people in general should not be should be treated. And I believe that you should be like Jesus. You should follow in his footsteps, and we should have a leader that does that and cares about the people and not about their own agenda or taking over the country or specific groups being above others, so I felt like, since I have a voice, I should at least be there and be there to speak out.
How did you feel at the protest? What was the energy? How did you feel before it? How did you feel after it? Just tell me about the experience.
Okay, so before it, I was actually kind of nervous because I've never been to a protest. There was nothing that I really felt so strongly about that I was like, oh, I need to go. But the last couple weeks, I felt like I really needed to go to this one, so ended up planning on going. Was super thrilled that my friend ended up going with me because I was nervous to go alone, but I had my friend there, so that was good. Once we got there, like, people were really nice. It was like, so I was kind of expecting it to be more like the BLM riots that happened in 2020, 2021. I was expecting that kind of energy, like aggressive, but it was not like that at all. It was very just like down to earth people. And what was great about it is very much relayed, not just at this protest, but online as well, to just be peaceful. And you can tell it was just the most peaceful people there. Very friendly energy, very fun energy. Yeah, we stayed for like 2, maybe 3 hours. We marched from the park to the Capitol. And then once we got there, we were around for, I think, an hour and a half. And then we ended up leaving. But it was really fun. When we were at the Capitol, lots of cars were driving by honking in support, which was really cool to see. It was just, yeah, it was a really fun time.
How did you feel after the protests? I know that sometimes people attend these protests and feel really empowered after, or feel like a weight's lifted off. How did you feel after the protest?
I felt really good. It was really cool to see how many people were there, like I said earlier. And so once seeing that, knowing that it was just the first real organized protest for this, it was empowering to see that many people showed up. So knowing that it will just keep getting bigger and hopefully the cause will be heard in some way here in Nebraska is good. Yeah.
I know that a lot of these issues have been going on for a very long time. Do you feel like they've been sort of renewed with this new political instability, or do you feel like this is a culmination of things that have been happening? How do you feel this compares to, eras in the past?
Oh, yeah, let's talk about that. So one of the main things that I only cared about to learn in history was the Holocaust. And that's also what got me like right into this protesting thing right away, is because everything is aligning to a T, but in modern times, to how Hitler took control of Germany. So with that, it is freaky, it is scary, which is exactly why people need to be out there. It is nuts to see how many people are not educated on World War II and how it became and how the government was and what exactly Hitler did. That's one thing I've been studying a lot on the last couple of weeks, just to get my facts straight, and it is crazy how aligned it is. What is sad to see right now already, without anything dramatic really happening besides the deportations, which are already dramatic in itself, is that the hate that is already spreading towards towards minority groups. We're already seeing people that are citizens that are just living here, living their life. They have their whole life and they were born here too. We're seeing them getting hate crimed right now. I saw somebody on TikTok whose neighbor beat on him just because he was Mexican. Everybody is equal, even if they aren't born here and they cross the border and they're here illegally or whatever the story is. They should be treated as if Jesus was treating them, like how he would treat anybody he came across in the Bible. We should not be acting this way and accepting the fact that we're gonna just call them illegal aliens and take people places where they do not live in inhumane conditions to Guantanamo Bay, which is starting this week, which is absolutely insane. I don't know. It's just crazy. It is crazy what is happening. And I think it's a lot scarier than what people are really realizing, So.
Yeah, what do you think moving forward do Nebraskans need to be doing? What action can people be taking?
Showing up to protests, voting in, what is it, 2 years from now? Less than 2 years from now? Voting in the next election. We definitely just need more people to represent us and represent people that care about people. I don't know. I saw that it's impactful to send letters or emails to the governor or whoever the government in Nebraska to at least get something done here, which might help because our governor is in support of the deportations and he said that he'll help him out. So protesting that would probably be the main thing. I don't know, just protest because it can be really impactful. Just seeing the LA protest this week, it's definitely going to do something in LA and in California for sure. So I don't know. Let your vote be heard, let your voice be heard, and yeah, protest.
Yeah. We hear a lot that everyone thinks, or every generation thinks, that this is the worst it's ever been, when that may or may not be the case. How do you think that compares to what's happening right now? Do you think this is much different from 2020, from 2016, things like that? Or do you think it is a culmination?
Yeah. So I think people voted for Trump in hopes that it would be the same as 2016, where he did do some good. But I think that the things that he focused on, which was these deportations and building the wall and all of these things, weren't voiced to people to the extent as what he's doing now. So I really think that now, looking back at it, I think everything done in 2016, I don't really know much of 2020 because I checked out of politics once everything, I don't know, our government is. But I feel like Trump just really just set himself up for a plan that he has had this whole time. So, I don't know. I think our economy is going to be crashed because of these deportations, and people need to be ready for that. It's definitely not going to be smooth sailing from here on out for the next 4 years if this keeps going on. So yeah, I don't know. That's a hard question.
Yeah, sorry about that. You've sort of touched on it here and there, but how do you think the legislation that's being passed or is being issued federally, locally, on any level, how do you think that's going to be affecting Nebraska citizens or members of the community?
So a large portion of our workforce for our farms they're actually Mexican. So with that, if we are deporting everybody that we say that we are going to deport, it will definitely affect our food supply here in Nebraska. It's not going to be the same in the grocery stores initially. I think just the community is going to change drastically. I think people are not going to be treating people the same. They're going to, I don't know. It's scary to even try to like think about what is going to happen or what the effect will be of all of this, but I don't know. It seems like not a peaceful way that we're taking right now.
Right.
Right.
So there is, a lot of tension, and, you mentioned your family being Republican and
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more the other way. That's
Mm-hmm.
really causing some rifts there.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to anything on that note, between party divides, specifically as it pertains to family?
Yeah.
How you have navigated things like that, or how you suggest that people navigate that?
Yeah, so I'm actually just learning how to navigate it because I was sharing similar beliefs with them before up until the last couple months. So I am now learning how to navigate it myself, but I will say that one thing is that I'm pretty good at doing is just keeping the conversations off the table with them. If they want to try to talk about politics, I'm just not going to engage because I don't know, something about, at least right now, with what's going on right now, they are just being so hard-headed and don't want to read into anything or look at information or I don't know. And which is crazy. But so yeah, it is the first time I'm dealing with it, but like personally, yeah, just avoiding conversations at this point. I'm going to speak my mind and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to these protests. I'm going to post whatever I want to post. And I'm just not going to, I just don't engage with them if they want to argue about anything. But if they want to ask me any questions eventually and they want to ask why I think this way, then I will be willing to engage in conversations about politics. But other than that, just, yeah, keep it off the table. And if they're grown up, they'll still talk to you. So,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Do you have any final statements or things you want to share, subjects that we didn't talk about that you'd like to speak to?
I would just want to say to remind everybody to remember their morals and what they believe in. It's not so much politics anymore, like who voted what side are you on. It's really like it's a human rights issue at this point. Do you care about other humans or do you not? So to really look on the inside and look around, listen to actual stories of people who are going through these things and form an opinion of your own, and don't just turn away and think that this is nothing. Definitely look inside and do some evaluating if you are questioning what's going on. So
Great. Well, thank you so much for
thank
talking
you so much
to me.
for having me.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
We just heard Brooke Burchett, an attendee at the march at Trago Park on Wednesday, January 29th, discuss her experience at the protest and how the current political instability we're experiencing intersects with her religion and family. At the center of these protests, and at the center of the narratives of these protest attendees, is the desire to make change. A common theme in these interviews with attendees is a sense of powerlessness, and through protests and protest attendance, attendees find themselves with the political efficacy they were seeking. In her interview, Dr. Allie Putman, assistant professor of political science at Nebraska Wesleyan University, spoke about this and about the effectiveness of protest.
Seeing all these protests talking about the way that leaders rely on public perception in a lot of ways, do you think that protests are effective? I know that's a really kind of dumbed down question and it's really basic, but do you think a lot of these protests that we're currently seeing are effective for making that change that groups are hoping to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I certainly think they are. It may not always feel like it, because it's hard to push for and see that really substantive policy change. And I think for many, it can be a demoralizing process to protest and then not see that change quickly. I do think that they are effective in some ways. The kinds of changes that people are pushing for do make a really substantive impact on the kinds of rhetoric we see, even when talking about like Donald Trump during COVID and 2020 and all of that stuff. We can see really drastically how his behavior and mannerisms towards the public change once we start to see large-scale protests against him during the election. I think they can. It is really just a question of where they are and how televised it is in some ways. Like some of the most effective protests that I've seen were like the ones in the 1970s, where we see like people in the LGBTQ community and people of color protesting together. Those were really like moving, impactful moments for the United States that did fundamentally push policy forward. I think in many ways we still see that behavior. It's just harder because we don't see the effect as quickly.
That was Dr. Allie Putman, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Nebraska Wesleyan University, discussing the effectiveness of protest. The impacts of policy and administration changes are far-reaching, impacting all communities and all ages. Even those without voting power find themselves moved to action. I spoke with Bailey Adcock, a student at Lincoln East High School, discussing her experience as a student becoming politically active and her plans going forward. Bailey attended the counter-protest for Walk for Life march hosted by Nebraska Right to Life on Saturday, February 3rd, and attended another protest against new immigration and deportation policy later that evening.
The first protest I went to was a counter-protest against the Walk for Life, the annual Walk for Life that happened at the Nebraska State Capitol. That took place at about 10 a.m., 10 to 12. And the second protest I attended was also at the state capitol. This one was I think people have different names for it. I pretty much know it as the Abolish ICE protest.
The
It
what?
was,
Abolish ICE.
yeah, it was against like the deportations that have been happening, and I guess deportation rights in general. I was gonna say it was mainly the natural born citizenship that the new administration has. I don't know exactly the process, but
Yeah.
that's been taking place.
Okay.
Sorry, what did you say?
Yeah, I was just going to ask where you heard about these protests.
I heard about them from my friend Devea, who posted about it on her story, the first protest at least. The second protest I had heard the day of and just decided to attend.
What, have you ever attended any protests before?
I have never, no.
Gotcha. And what was it? Maybe it was because you were too young or there were other circumstances, but what made you want to attend these two?
I don't think I've ever really had very solidified beliefs before. Not in the past. Well, I was young last year and I still am, but I think this year, 2024, last year, my beliefs have really solidified, and I think I've formed opinions that I just wasn't, like, I was uneducated. I didn't know, I wasn't aware of anything
Right.
really, I just kind of lived how I lived.
How did you feel like at these protests, any of the things that were being protested affected you or people you know, or did you just go to show your support?
I mainly just went to show my support. I don't have anybody really close to me that is being affected by that.
Hmm.
Um, though the first protest, I have some close ties to, but not necessarily enough to. It was just kind of I'd like to show my support and gather with a community to make change.
When you were at these protests, either one of them, whichever you want to describe, or you can describe both of them, what was the energy there like? How did you feel before going, and how did you feel when you were there?
The first protest, I will say, was a lot, it was very small. There was probably only less than 20 people in total compared to the hundreds of people in the Walk for Life that we were counter protesting.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of disheartening, I will say. You can't really you can't be one person talking to hundreds. Your voice just can't be heard. Um, and I left a bit early from that protest before the walk actually began. I stayed through the speeches of Jim Pillen, Deb Fisher, and a few other people. I think a woman who was a leader of the Methodist Church, maybe Lutheran Church.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I stayed through all the speeches, but it was very cold, and I left before the walk to warm up.
Gotcha. You were
So
describing the counter protest,
the
right?
counter protest, yeah.
Yeah.
The second protest, I felt it was just a lot. It was very good. The energy was like supportive. It was calming. It was kind of like embracing almost. um Everybody there, like you could see visibly everybody there, like nobody looked the same. It was all um just a lot of people from different backgrounds and different jobs, different, I don't know, personalities. And I liked that because I think it gave us more strength. There was also just in size, there was probably 200 people at that protest, I'm guessing. Enough that I felt that our voice was heard, and I felt like we were actually making somewhat of a difference, maybe small.
Yeah, what would you say, could you determine a specific goal of this protest or of these movements in general, or a personal goal that you felt going into it?
I think personally, I going into the protests, I felt that I was doing something more productive with my time than just sitting at home reading the news, watching my friends' stories. I felt that I was making a difference, and maybe that's not true, but I think I felt like I was. Um, Going into it. Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, you kind of answered it, if you'd like to share more, of course. But I was just wondering, what was your goal going into this protest, or what do you think the goals of the protests were?
I think the main goal of I think both protests, maybe not, because the first protest, it was a counter protest. It's an annual thing. Nothing has changed. It's been going on for years. Um, I think but this, I think maybe the first year that there was actually a counter protest. I could be wrong though. Um, and I think a lot of that has to do with the new administration. Just people, um, the news people are hearing, it's upsetting, and obviously people who are like very affected by it, they want to make a difference in some way, um, by going to protests.
Mhm. Yeah, do you think, with these both being your first protests, do you think your activism will continue in the future? Or do you think you're just gonna, where do you see yourself going, with the current administration and with your own activism in the future?
I definitely see myself attending more protests. In fact, I was going to attend the one this Wednesday, but I couldn't. But there are plenty more in the future that I have found, um, ones which ones which align with my perspective, and Um, and I do plan to attend one this Saturday, and I hope that that can continue as long as sorry, my cat, as long as I continue to have my beliefs.
Right, yeah. Do you feel like this is an issue that more students are being active about? Do you feel like your age constrains you or the legitimacy of your concerns at all? How do you feel as such a young person being so active and involved?
Um, I feel like I think a lot of people are um, kind of disapproving of my stance on things and just the fact that I would go to a protest in general. I know I've talked with people close to me about it. Just, hey, what did you do last Saturday? Oh, I went to two protests, and it's kind of um, one. I think I am young. I definitely don't know a lot of things. I don't know everything in the world. Um, but I think the further that you protest, the more you do learn, and the more you learn about issues that you had never even heard of before. I also I'm a member of my school's yearbook, so a lot of we don't cover protests, but we do cover student-led activist events. A lot of the people in my yearbook did attend a couple of the protests recently, and I think that that has changed like a lot of people's views on it. If my friends are going, if these people that I know are going, I feel more comfortable going. And I hope that that catches on at any school and just across the globe.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Bailey. I think that's all the questions I have for right now. But thank you again so much for everything you shared with me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Of course. That was Bailey Adcock, a student at Lincoln East High School, discussing her experience attending two protests as a high school student and her plans and goals going forward. We're now coming up on our first break of the hour. When we get back, we'll sit down with one more protest attendee to learn his perspective on the political tension we're experiencing and how he ties it in with his faith. Sit tight, we'll be right back.
Support for KZUM comes from Lincoln Pharmacy, a local neighborhood pharmacy located at 33rd and A Streets, offering medication therapy management, adherence packaging, medical supplies, prescription delivery, COVID and flu vaccines, and more. Open Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturdays from 10 till 4. More information is available at lincoln-rx.com.
And from El Centro de las Americas, presenting the 18th annual fundraising event, Wine, Chocolate, and Tango, on Friday, April 18th from 6 to 11 p.m. at the Cornhusker Marriott. The Lincoln Tango Club will perform during dinner, which includes a full meal with sides and 3 courses of paired wines and chocolates, along with a silent auction and El Centro Market. All proceeds benefit El Centro and the community members they support. Further details and tickets are available online at elcentrone.org.
Life-saving blood is a gift only volunteer donors can give. Right now, Nebraska Community Blood Bank needs you to donate blood. Visit ncbb.org today to schedule your donation.
Welcome back to today's episode of KZUM News. I'm Rebecca Ford, KZUM's news intern and your host for today. Before the break, we listened to the testimonies of 2 protest attendees, learning how background and values factor into these attendees' beliefs and their goals and plans going forward. We also had Dr. Allie Putman, assistant professor of political science at Nebraska Wesleyan University, speak to several issues, including what local protests look like and their effectiveness, as we navigate the political and social unrest resulting from post-administration changes. In this next clip, Dr. Putman also discusses her thoughts on how instability influences public perceptions and attitudes towards protesting.
With that being said, we're kind of seeing this fluctuation in our current political environment that it's really hard to predict what's going to happen, what we're seeing here, and how policy making is going to move forward, depending on, pushback that this administration is receiving from the public, from even within their own organizations. What is your thoughts? What are your thoughts on how that kind of instability influences public perceptions and like attitudes towards protesting?
Yeah. So I think it's twofold, right? You have some people who are motivated by that instability, who I think see the struggle and the things happening in government and they're upset by it and want to see a change, and that drives them to protest and protest with much more strength. Like if we take like January 6th, for example, we consider that a protest movement in some ways. Like that is very much a situation where people felt like they had been denied a certain thing, like the election had been stolen. And because of that, they turned out to protest that kind of instability. On the other hand, we also see a lot of people who are kind of demoralized by the instability. They see what's happening in government and feel like nothing can be changed. And so in some ways, that kind of feeling can be inhibited or inhibitive of protest movements, because there are lots of people who probably do care a lot about what's going on, but don't maybe feel like protesting would be an efficient use of their time to pursue what they want. So it's kind of twofold in many ways.
In the clip we just heard, Dr. Allie Putman discusses the two common attitudes towards protesting in the face of instability, including those who are demoralized or disheartened by the instability and are slower to protest, and those who are motivated by instability and driven to protest by it. If those are the two common attitudes in the face of instability, our next protest attendee, Ashton Barlow, is of the latter nature. Ashton Barlow, a philosophy and religion and theater arts double major at Nebraska Wesleyan University, attended the march at Trago Park on Wednesday, January 29th. Ashton speaks to his experience at this protest, his connection to his faith, and what he believes we need to be prioritizing in times like these.
And was it just the protest last Wednesday you attended, or have you been to others? What's your involvement in?
Yeah. So far, I have just been involved in one protest on last Wednesday. This Friday, I will be going to a hearing for the anti-trans bill that's trying to be pushed forward, and I'm planning on continuing to be involved in protests and different activities on and off campus. Also working to promote protests and things within the two clubs I run here at Wesleyan.
Yeah, can you go into that about the clubs you do and how you plan to promote?
Yeah, so I'm the president of WSF, our Wesleyan Student Fellowship, which is like a Christian fellowship club, and one of the big priorities that we're trying to prioritize, big things that we're trying to prioritize right now is justice work, specifically social justice, specifically we're trying to address all the stuff that's coming at us right now. Big main focuses of a Christian organization in this will be working against Christian nationalism, because Christian nationalism is scary and it's overtaken our government. And then the other organization that I run is Bridge, our interfaith club here at Wesleyan. I'm the president of that as well. And what we're doing is we're trying to work within our different faith presences on campus, and help there be a community amongst all the turmoil. So big things we're going to do for that aren't necessarily protest related, but we're doing some stuff for Ramadan and beyond. So, yeah.
Awesome. Bringing the focus back to the Wednesday march, can you tell me how you heard about that?
Yeah. I heard about that from a friend who saw it on an Instagram post, I think. And I was like, I need to be here. I literally skipped over half of one of my courses. I bought poster boards for it, and then a group of me and some of my friends went to the march.
Nice.
Yes.
What was it about that march that drew you towards it? How do those issues at the march affect you?
Yeah. the biggest thing that drew me towards it is I needed to do something about what's going on right now. There's a lot of inaction amidst all the panic, and I needed something that was action. For me, the things that drew me towards that march were the undocumented immigrant stuff. That is, we're on the 7th step to a genocide. Any further down that road is bad. Where we are right now is bad. I not just from my Christian belief of wanting to make the world a more heavenly place, which means bringing people who are being oppressed, helping them reach a more equitable position. That's what I want to do when it pertains to undocumented migrants here in America. I think that what is being done to them is unjust, and ultimately I can only help. I'm not an undocumented migrant, but I am a U.S. citizen, and everyone's words have value and meaning, and I'm not going to stand here and watch a genocide happen. So,
yeah. How did you feel at the protest? What was the energy there, and how did you feel when you attended?
Yeah. When the protest started, there was like a lot of, oh no, I don't know what to do right now. Like, everyone was kind of gathered around a park table in Trago Park where we started. And as we started the march, there was some chatter, and then the first shout started. The first cries out of real protest, of vocal protest, other than the signs that we were holding in the march that we were doing. And once that started, it started with just a few shouts at first. And then they got louder and more numerous. And then all of us, especially the really vocal ones, grew more and more comfortable with shouting, with speaking. And there's a few of us that kind of rose to the forefront in that. For me, it was, I needed to say stuff. I wanted to start chants. I wanted to help promote this, and standing there silently wasn't gonna cut it. So it was energizing. It was exciting. There was a sense of hope amidst the fear and anger that we were feeling, because we were together. We were a community, and I think that's the biggest merit of protests. Not just making ourselves be known, making our voices be heard, but having hope through that, because we know that we're surrounded by a community of other people that feel the same.
Yeah. What can you describe to me what time the protest took place, the path you took? Do you know why you took that path?
Yeah. I'm not too good with the exact path.
It's okay.
We went from Trago Park to the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
We marched through downtown. And we, honestly, right after Trago Park, we walked through this really nice little valley by some buildings. I don't know. It was cute. And we took that path so that we were known. We wanted the streets to see us. We wanted busy sections during rush hour to see us. They can't avoid us. Mm-hmm. There is no ignoring this protest. And what we saw from that is an overwhelming amount of support. You know, there were some people in their cars, heads down, as we were blocking the road. But there were other people that were honking in a good way as they were driving by. Some people that looped around and came by multiple times to show their support. And that helped, I think, us know that we're not the singular body amidst a rush of people who hate us. That there were people out there driving on the streets that saw us and that appreciated what we were doing and that supported us.
You said that, some of the goals for this protest might have been visibility, not in those exact terms, but
Yeah.
visibility, awareness to issues. Do you feel like there's any long-term goals or solutions that can solve these perceived problems?
Yeah. So the way that I see these protests going, it's a two-fronted assault that we need to do. So first of all, we're really concerned with the way this nation is leading. It seems very fascist to us. These are the exact circumstances, things that were happening in Germany before World War II. And at least how I'm approaching it, I'm following kind of the path that Martin Luther King Jr. took, and that two-fronted assault is peaceful protest. He calls it, I think, the flaming sword of peaceful protest, something along those lines. And legislation, making sure we're passing legislation that is beneficial, that does improve equity, that isn't taking away rights of trans people, or isn't promoting or forcing or having ICE come into our schools and churches and neighborhoods. Our ultimate goal through all of this is to create a better United States, a United States that doesn't oppress people. I mean, whether people like to admit it or not, we're still living in, even before the Trump administration, we were still living in a nation that has slavery in the prison system. We're still living in a nation that is deeply divided through class and by race. And we're trying to put an end to this, one little step at a time. And right now, our focuses are queer issues, immigration, and bodily autonomy.
How do you think that people can support this, or how can a citizen further these goals?
Yeah. There's a few ways to support this. First of all is writing to your local senator. There's a variety of things that you can write to your local senator on. There's organizations that can help you understand the legal lingo that's going on. One that I really support is Nebraska Appleseed. They are where I get most of my information from, and they will also provide avenues for you to find your senator, and then send an email to them. So make sure you're communicating with your senator in any way, and that you're expressing your disapproval or approval of certain bills. And that's a very logistical way to get involved. Another way is by going to these protests and rallies. We need you. We need to see your face. We need to see your voice. And knowing that we have your support is really, really special to us. So that's another huge way. And then finally, speaking up for these groups. We all might not understand the specific turmoil that these oppressed groups are going through, but trying to educate yourself and then and then speak up for them, or support your friends who are in these oppressed groups. Inaction is only helping the enemy. Inaction is only preventing progress. The only way forward, the only moral way forward, the only just way forward is through helping these people have a spot in society, helping these people become citizens, helping these people more fully become human in America. When we have legislation, when we have people on the other side who are saying, no, I don't think that transgender individuals should be able to use the bathroom of the gender that they identify with. That's treating them subhuman. And in no way standing by and seeing that's not going to help. You're not being involved. You are supporting the other side.
Thank you. You mentioned the enemy. Can you describe to me who is or what is the enemy?
Yeah. The way I see it, and also no, I'm a crazy liberal. The way I see it, fascism is the enemy. That's a big buzzword that people are using, and really what it means is that an oppressive government that isn't giving every human rights is trying to elevate through power dynamics one group of individuals over others. That's the enemy. Throughout history, this has been all sorts of things. This has been whites over blacks. This has been a social caste holding power over another social caste. And really, the enemy isn't a singular enemy. Yeah, sure, it can be Donald Trump if you want it to be Donald Trump, but really, he's just the figurehead of all of this. It is, in my Christian terms, I'll say it's a communal sin. It's not an individual sin. And what we're fighting against is the enemy, or the communal sin of power being held over other people. And what we're trying to eliminate is people being treated subhuman in any way, shape, or form for any bias. And yeah, I guess that's what the enemy is. It's anyone or any organization that is trying to harm an individual or group of people.
I guess something that a lot of people say a lot is Lincoln is a blue dot in a red sea. How do you think that plays into the, perceived challenges regarding legislation? Do you think, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I heard during the election, my vote doesn't matter because the state's choice is going to be red no matter what. I heard that both in Nebraska and where I live when I'm not in school, Kansas. And to be honest, that's a very flawed way of thinking about it. Your vote does matter. Your voice does matter. You are a citizen or someone who lives in the United States. And because of that, because you exist here, your voice matters. Your voice matters to your senator, who will speak up for you. In Nebraska, many, many times, we have gotten legislation to change because we've made our voices be heard. So, in regards to Lincoln being a dot in a blue sea, don't feel discouraged by that. It doesn't mean that there's an unstoppable wall that we can't break through. It simply just means that we need to push to get to let our voices be heard, because what happens here in Lincoln affects a lot of the rest. It affects the rest of the state. So passing positive legislation here in Lincoln for different marginalized groups will help other cities and towns in Nebraska that may seem more red.
Yeah, something that just came back to me is I think that right now everything we're seeing is being magnified, and I think what we're seeing is the result of a lot of, struggle on either sides of party lines. And I want to ask, do you think what's happening right now with protests and other, the general feelings of tension and instability, do you think those are intensified or renewed, or do you think that we're in a quote-unquote worse place than we have historically?
Yeah. That's a good question. And I think the first thing we should note is that every single time a president is elected and then finally gets into office, there's a slew of executive orders that are sent out. The media it's going to seem scarier because it's going to feel more intensified. The thing that for me makes this different is the culmination of all sorts of different things into what's going on right now. This election for some people was, we want to get our favorite orange-faced guy back in the office, and we want to do this for economic reasons, or maybe for some moral reasons. But for the other side, it was, if Trump comes back into office, we're afraid that we might die, or we will die because of it. And that's not, I don't believe that that's me going to... Already since Trump was elected, we have seen things like trans youth suicide rates rise. Nothing's being done to address that on a legal level. I think it's also important to note the people in power right now. Trump isn't being surrounded by politicians in the most classic of senses. Trump is being surrounded by billionaires. Trump is being surrounded by a certain class of people. And these are the people that are speaking into his ear. One of the things that Elon seems to align with more than anything is something called a superior aristocracy. And that is an aristocracy, the ruling class all being superior humans in one way or another, and in Elon Musk's perspective, that is intellectually superior. And this is language that Trump has adopted. We're kicking out DEI, and we want to hire the most intelligent people. Well, those intelligent people are not going to be a diverse cast of intelligent people. They're probably going to be white people. They're probably going to be white old men, because intelligence doesn't really work like that. So yeah, I think it's different from what it has been in the past. I do think that there are things being portrayed online and on the media as like super scary, when we really need to be looking at them with a more rational brain. But with everything, you need to take it with a grain of salt. And you should still be fighting for it, because the inaction is just going to promote the harmful things that they're already doing.
I think that's about all I had for questions, and I think that's about pretty close to the time that I have. But
Great.
I appreciate you speaking with me. You've given me a lot of great things to work with. So.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
We just finished speaking with Ashton Barlow, a philosophy and religion and theater arts double major at Nebraska Wesleyan University, about his experience at the March at Trago Park on Wednesday, January 29th, and his belief in what we need to be prioritizing. While our story here is ending, the greater narratives that are playing out in our homes, our neighborhoods, and communities are still ongoing. Today, we've discussed social unrest in Lincoln as a result of tension from post-administrative change. We spoke to 3 protest attendees to learn more about their protest experiences and hear the voices of those playing an active role in this political zeitgeist. We also spoke to Dr. Ali Putman, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Nebraska Wesleyan University, to gain an academic perspective on the story. Protests are not new, but our heightened awareness of them is, and the goals behind protests are constantly changing. While unrest as a result of post-administrative change may be typical of changing administrations, the times we are living in are the first of their kind, and every day is new and uncharted territory. That's all for today. Thank you.
We are fast approaching the end of the hour, so here are your reminders for today. The KZUM Newsroom is always open to hearing about any questions, concerns, suggestions, or even any story ideas that you might want to share with us. All you have to do is give us a call at 402-474-5086, extension line 6. If you give us a call and we aren't available, don't forget to leave a voicemail. Or, if you aren't much of a phone person, you can also find our social media handles and more newsroom information at kzum.org under that About tab. Speaking of our website, if you happen to miss a show, you can always head to the KZUM News tab, where we archive all of our shows and include a transcript with links to that day's content. And lastly, I just want to give a shout out to Jack Rodenberg of the Rodenberg Music Experience. He put together all of the amazing original music that our news program uses. So once again, thank you, Jack. That wraps up our reminders for now. As you head out into the world, I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you for listening, and we hope you'll join us next time. You just finished listening to KZUM News, an original production of KZUM Radio that airs every Saturday at 11 a.m. Coming up next is Beta Radio, so stay tuned.